All right, next up, light heavyweights throwing down as we have Junior Tafa coming in at -190, going up against Kevin Christian, who comes in at +165. Now, currently 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Junior Tafa is looking to buck this 2-fight losing streak that he currently finds himself on. Now, if you guys have been watching me for a while, you guys know that I love to fade Junior Tafa. I think he got into the UFC because of his name. He has some good striking, obviously, or mediocre striking, I'd say. Some good knockout power that he can obviously show, just as he showed in the Sean Sharaf and Parker Porter wins. But again, those fights I think are marred by a little bit of controversy, as both those fights he got away with very egregious fence grabs that prevented takedowns from his opponents. And as we've seen in recent fights, when he can be taken down, he can be submitted. He can be kept on his back. Now, striking is obviously his forte, right? He wants to get to his striking. He wants to land his power. He wants to get his opponents out of there. His first line of grappling defense is actually not that bad. It's once you're able to get him to settle on his back that he actually just accepts the position and allows opponents to get to spots where they can actually find the finish. But on the feet, and that first line of grappling defense, we see that he can actually have some good success, picking opponents apart. In the Billy Alicana fight, he shucked off all 3 of the takedowns that Alicana had in the first round. And he was actually able to drop Alicana in the first round as well. But Alicana eventually got back to it in the second round, eventually got the fight to the ground, and then from there he was able to find the submission finish against Tafa. So it's just, if you're relentless enough with the takedowns, it'll eventually come. But if he can get that power on you before you get him to the ground, that's where he's going to end up being most effective. He's only 29 years old. I'm sure he's trying to work on getting better and getting stronger and working on his grappling defense. But I just don't think this is a guy that's ever going to crack into the top 15 of the light heavyweight division, even with how thin that division is. Now, he's going up against Kevin Christian, who is also coming off of a submission loss at the hands of Billy Alicana. That was Christian's UFC debut. He earned his way to the UFC through the Contender Series, pulling off, I believe it was an upset win over Francesco Mazzio, in what was probably the worst Contender Series fight we've ever seen in terms of guys that are not that skilled. Even though Christian is a BJJ black belt, it was a very sloppy performance. And even Mazzio, right? I remember fading him on Contender Series, on Cage Warriors during his come up, because he was just a guy that would go out there and his power would just come through for him, even though he was very sloppy in the rest of his game. In the Mazzio and Christian fight, it was hilarious seeing Mazzio gas himself out trying to out grapple a BJJ black belt, and that's where we see Christian eventually get that second round submission, tapping out an exhausted Mazzio. Christian, he's tall, lanky, obviously 6'7", 80-inch reach. That helps him obviously land that nasty knee that he landed against Miguel Porto to get onto the Contender Series. But he's very sloppy in the striking game. He's very hittable, as Billy Alicana obviously showcased. Doesn't have the greatest durability either, especially if guys can land cleanly enough. His best shot is just hoping that his strength comes through, where he can get opponents to the ground and just smother them and eventually utilize his BJJ. But even that is really not UFC level in my opinion. Now, this is a matchup similar to Jackson McVeigh and Cedricus Dumas from this past weekend, between two guys that are quite low level. I think, and I'm going to preface this by saying, you guys know how much I love to fade Junior Tafa. You give me an underdog that has a good enough grappling game, I'm fading him. But Kevin Christian is not that guy in my opinion. I think Junior Tafa's initial line of grappling defense will work out enough for him here to keep this fight standing. And I think he's going to be able to take advantage of the tall man defense of Christian, and that will lead to Tafa landing that big shot to topple the giant and eventually find the knockout there. I'd be surprised if Tafa follows Christian to the ground, and I'd also be surprised if Christian can actually get this fight to the ground. I think Tafa will showcase good enough grappling defense and eventually find that big shot to put Christian away. So even at -190, honestly, I know how low level Tafa is. I'm expecting him to go out there and get a pretty emphatic knockout here to buck this losing streak and get a big win in front of close to a hometown crowd here as Junior Tafa wins this fight by knockout.